People like to classify and organize anything into some semblance of structure. Societies, cultures, collections, you name it, we put some sort of definition on it, and the label sticks. Gamers are no different. For as long as video games have existed, we've sought to delineate and classify ourselves through some sort of arbitrary metric that defines how hardcore of a gamer we are by virtue of the games we all play. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, however, is what we plan on talking about here. Is it time, in the name of inclusivity and peace, to drop the classifying and get rid of the labels once and for all, or do they still need to be maintained? So what does it mean to be a gamer? We'll give you our thoughts right here on this episode of Downloadable Content. Welcome to Downloadable Content. I'm Brian, and we have a full boat on this episode. We have Shanna.
Hello.
We have Ben.
Howdy do.
We have Ronnie.
Yo-ho.
And the ever-present Wyatt.
Guten Tag, wie geht es Ihnen?
Ron will join us later on. He's currently, indisposed with work and life and responsibility and all that shit. So, doing that whole, I need an income thing.
Ah, yeah.
Retail wage slave.
He's making sure he can afford all those games we talk about.
Yeah, I want to know how many of our listeners have been negatively affected in their wallet by the games we bring up. But
Steam summer sale, anybody?
Yeah, that.
Lots of that.
Of that. But yes, we are going to be talking about what does it mean to be a gamer on this particular episode. We'll throw out some opinions and have hopefully some good discussion. But before we dive into that, let me get all of the plugs out of the way. You can find every episode of Downloadable Content on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. You can get a hold of us in a variety of ways. Facebook.com/DLContent. On Twitter at DLContent, on Tumblr at dlcpodcast.tumblr.com, and if you want to use the ancient form of email, dlcontent1@gmail.com. So there we are. All the plugs are out of the way. I've got that thing memorized by now. It's only, 4 years? It's alright. So, the issue we're going to talk about on this episode, I was inspired by it by a recent article in Game Informer that I hope you all read, minus Wyatt, since he just joined in at the last second.
There's actually a matching sort of thing that was going on the PBS game show, where he kind of covers it really, really well, actually, in a very, 9-minute span. It's a YouTube article.
I have heard about the PBS, this thing on PBS, but I haven't actually seen it. I'm basing today's episode on an article in the February issue of Game Informer, the article is called "The Changing Definition of Gamer."
The other side of that is that this keeps coming up, but it's not like this is the first time this has come up, because every year or so, something new will get printed that'll bring this back into the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for gaming, because I'm actually seeing a lot of that, where there's a lot of repeat questions, the big ones, because before, we were all just people in our basements trying to hide from society, and we had a very structured, this is what a role-playing game is, this is what a first-person shooter is. And now, every single year, someone asks, is the Japanese RPG finished? And then, but it's asked every single year. Same thing with this, what does it mean to be a gamer? Every single year.
Yeah. Well, the other side of it is, everybody wants to be, or subconsciously at least, everybody wants to be part of a tribe. They want people that they can connect with. And people use the term gamer to refer to what they are, and as what a gamer is broadens into a bigger umbrella, you get people who get brought in that you don't you don't connect with it. You don't understand as much because they game in a different way than you do, and for a lot of people, that's kind of scary.
That's completely true. I mean, I could see that happening. Like a similar example of that is like it's just like, you know, music in the scene, and it's like, okay, everyone gets into like heavy metal, and then different types of heavy metal bands come about, so different types of heavy metal fans come out, and it's the same thing. Then you have people who were originally there who get uncomfortable with the new guard, and it's kind of the same it's the same sort of thing that happens with a lot of different sorts of hobbies or basically things that people get passionate about. The same thing has happened with gaming, and I think it's been more of a it's obviously been more of a conversation within, I think, the past 10 years.
Definitely with the advent of social media and online play and things like Twitch, where you have the esports scene, definitely things like that. So the definition, what we used to think of as a gamer back in, say, like the 80s and 90s, is far different than now. Yeah.
So social games and phone games, Android and iPhone. I mean, those are, I don't have the numbers, but I'm pretty sure I've read some stuff where those are more played, like total number of people, than any AAA title anywhere.
But those aren't real gamers.
Yeah,
that's there it is.
It only took
angry German coming out.
It only took
his stamp.
It only took 7 minutes for Wyatt to become that asshole. That might be a record.
That guy. Don't be that. I had to. I just had to throw it out because it was going to happen sometime.
Don't be a dick.
Well, I actually want to come at the conversation from a different angle when you guys are done, but I didn't want to interrupt anybody.
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free to interrupt. We do it all the time.
I've noticed, but I didn't want to.
Ronnie's the new Nick.
Oh, I miss Nick. No, my argument is kind of, can we drop the label? Like, I mean, does it really need to be there? Because part of the problem I have with labels, and in general, there are really two ways to look at things. One is to be inclusive, and the other is, unfortunately, to be exclusive. And a lot of the time, the gamer label, especially the way it gets used in some contexts, is more in the way that Wyatt kind of, and I'm going to use some big air quotes here, sarcastically used it right there. It's more to keep people out of the club than it is to let them in the club. And that kind of bothers me a little bit. That's on my little list of notes of stuff I wanted to bring up on this, so you get a thumbs up from me. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I honestly think that this is just for life in general. I think that labeling stuff is a very, very human thing to do, but it's also something that causes more harm than good in a lot of ways. There was
we want to categorize things, but it's a problem when you start categorizing people.
There was a joke in I saw this meme on one of the websites. It was like funny kids' answers to test questions, and the question was, what is the science of classifying living things called? And it's, and the kid's response is racism.
Yeah. That's
So I mean, listen, and it's not everybody. We know it's not everybody. I'm not going to stand here and say that every gamer is exclusive, but I definitely feel that there is a contingent of people that started using that label more heavily because they were upset at the rise of more casual games, at the rise of Facebook games and mobile phone games, and it was a little bit of, all of a sudden this thing that they'd been ostracized for most of their lives was now cool, but it was cool in a different context than what they had kind of, I don't want to say suffered for, but, kind of the context that they had lived through. So now it's not okay that their thing is cool because the people don't like what they feel is true to the spirit or true to the actual, activity. It's something that's kind of a warped, offshoot of what they saw. And that's not how I feel about mobile games, but I definitely feel that there is a contingent of people who agree with that. And it's almost at that point like, why are we having this fight? Why are we having this conversation? Because, guys, it's only going to help us if these things become more and more accepted. Are more developers going to make casual games? Yeah, probably, because they're easier and quicker to make. But that doesn't mean that can't then inspire the developers that are still going to make the games we want to play. So it's sharing of ideas and sharing of information is never a bad thing.
There's two things off of what you were just saying. I mean, one, I think a lot of that mentality came from, as you said, a lot of people were ostracized for playing games, by older people who didn't understand when they were younger. And as it gets more inclusive, as more people get into this gaming thing, that it's not an issue that comes up that people are going to give you a hard time about playing games, but it's hard for them to get out of that mentality that they have to defend it and that this is their space, this is their safe haven with these gamers. And as more people come in, they get defensive about it, even though there's really no reason for them to.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. If I didn't stop talking, I just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. Just Shanna.
I do actually have a counter, but Shanna, I want to hear from you first.
Okay, well, what I'm thinking is that just going off of what you both said, there was a point where being a quote unquote gamer, I don't want to say wasn't a good thing, but it was something that you would get a bit sidelined for. And you're absolutely right, Ronnie, with there's a generational gap because there are people who didn't grow up with gaming and therefore they don't really understand it. They think that it's maybe just a very simplistic hobby that you're going to grow out of or whatever. And then we don't, because it's something that's natural to us, that came to us. But as gaming has become a bigger, more all-inclusive, more massive, business and pastime, then, yeah, it's that weird defensive. I guess I'll bring it back to the music analogy again. And it's kind of like the things that the hipsters do. Everyone gets into the, you've got your sideline group, you've got your fringe group that's into this small crop of bands. Those bands blow up and everybody likes them. And then the people who were originally there, they get callous about it because there's almost that whole we were there first and these sort of people don't understand, when we were ostracized for being outside and they're not in the true spirit of it. And, it's one thing to have pride for being, a gamer and being a fan of a game, but it's a matter of unbinding those things in your mind or in whoever's mind who thinks this way, that, these are people who are just sharing in the same things that we enjoy, but maybe they just haven't reached that level that we have yet, where maybe the mobile gaming is what's going to eventually get them to buy their first console. And I think that's the problem with the whole defensive stance, is it's not realizing that, hey, you know what, this is actually opening up, like you said, Ben, it's opening up the hobby to more people and in turn more games. It's just a matter of people learning how to, change their thinking rather than being defensive. Be like, hey, let's come on in.
Well, I just want to jump in and say that obviously that was me trolling when I did that kind of jump in there.
No, you don't say.
Thank you, Nick Cage.
Sure. But for me, I kind of am coming from a slightly different perspective, or I guess I want to come from a more positive side because I like to be an optimist. But first, yeah, I do believe that there can be some huge downsides to labeling in general. It allows people to get kind of quantified down to just a statistic or just to a talking point, which is one of the issues in many things, not just this. Another thing that really dovetails really well is the whole feminism in video games, which has become a really huge thing in the last few years, where a huge thing came up about the fake, girl gamers, which I know has been talked about a bit here, and I was expecting.
Yeah, Shanna was on that episode.
Yeah, and Shanna, if it's not too much for me to ask for your direct opinion here, have you ever got one of those? I know you were just at PAX with me. Did you ever get that look like you're a fake girl gamer? Did you ever get anything like that before, or that sort of mentality?
Personally, I haven't, but I can totally understand. I guess I can understand, maybe it's because I just kind of went there as myself, because the whole fake gamer girl thing kind of comes from feeling like you have to have this background of knowledge. And I felt that, I'll be honest, I have felt the fear that I'm going to be called out for that because, for example, I'm an anime fan, but I I'm not someone who knows every anime, and I'm very slow when it comes to knowing what the new animes are, and I'm still watching shit, stuff from 20 years ago. So I'm afraid if I were to walk into an anime con and get into a conversation with somebody and be like, oh, well, my favorite animes are Sailor Moon and Ron Mahat, they'd be like, well, you're not watching, Attack on Titan and this and that. Oh, you're not a real otaku. That's the sort of fear that I think that affects girls who feel like they're going to get that fake gamer girl label. It's the fact that you go in there and you feel like you've got to basically make sure you've got a deck in your back pocket that's ready to go.
Right.
And I'm sure that's the same thing that, coming back to the gamer conversation, that's the same thing that a new gamer or a new person getting into gaming would have to feel like, oh, well, I haven't built up enough of a knowledge or a background to really feel like I can share in this label yet. Or like, it's almost reaching a status sort of thing.
Right. So, I mean, that's the negative side, and it is frustrating. And I think it's definitely because, like a lot of our society, like there's this huge generational gap that's happening where it's definitely shifted, because it has gone from something that I did when I was in grade school, or I did while I was in middle school and high school, where it was something that it was socially exclusive, not because we wanted it to be so per se, but it was because that's the way it was. It wasn't accepted. You didn't really talk about it that much. And from then until now, that's changed. Now you can be a gamer in public. You can play games. I remember taking it as a source of pride that something that I really did while I was going through college for any of the gaming society at campus was I had a few people come up to me like, Wyatt, I'm always amazed by how brave you are. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, well, you mentioned that you play Dungeons and Dragons in public. That's a huge thing. It's really funny to think about that, like now, even though that's only 6 or 7 or 8 years ago that I remember hearing those comments. But it's just really funny to see that change. So we're going from this very exclusive to very inclusive, and I feel like that first generational leap is always really difficult sometimes, or when you've got such a dramatic change with all the technology that's involved and everything else like that. And of course, because gamership is so huge, and as I read through the article here, as I was waiting for my turn, as well as pretty much the same things were mentioned in the PBS game show, is there's so many different types of gamers. There's esports gaming. There is playing tabletop board games. And if you don't play the right miniatures game, or, I play Magic the Gathering, and you play Yu-Gi-Oh!, you're obviously not the real gamer. Jerk, you're playing a cheap knockoff. And it can become really divisive, partially because gamership is so inclusive that it can be so many different things at the same time. So trying to make it exclusive causes so many issues so quickly.
All right, Ben, you're up.
Well, this kind of feeds into all of that I was just talking about, because Shanna, to back your point, I remember. Let's sidetrack a little bit and show how nerdy we all really are. I remember when the Harry Potter books started getting really popular and started being turned into movies, the fever pitch around those. One of my friends from high school, very loudly complained, or actually I didn't go to high school with them, but, from around that time, very loudly complained that there were all these people that were now into these books that she felt were, they weren't real fans. They only knew about it because now suddenly it's popular, which, aside from being kind of the founding argument of what everybody thinks of as hipster culture, I mean, really kind of shows, the exclusivity, because it's kind of interesting to me, because a lot of times with these things that are not considered mainstream, people tend to sometimes get crap for them before they do get really popular, because they're into something that a lot of people aren't interested in. So they kind of recede further into them because it's a safe haven, it's a safe space. And now all of a sudden there are all these people fucking up their safe space. So I can understand where the territorial instinct kind of comes in, and I'm certainly not going to blame anybody for that. That's human instinct. And now all of a sudden it's, here's this thing I really like, and if they're going to make it into a movie, who knows who's going to be involved with it? Who knows what's going to be, who's going to be playing all these different characters that I'm so attached to. Now all these random people who don't really know it, who haven't followed it like I have, are going to be talking about it. It's just going to really dilute it, and now it's going to be terrible. So they want to move on to something else. And I think in some ways gaming culture kind of went through the same sort of thing. And it sucks, because it really does paint a bunch of people in a negative light. But on the other hand, I can understand the desire to protect what's sacred to you, what's in some cases maybe helped keep you sane or helped keep you safe for whatever reason. So I get where it's coming from. I just think it's kind of an interesting reversal when you almost think about it. The people who are being bullied are now suddenly becoming bullies themselves. In some cases, not everybody, of course, but it's just, this is another reason why I'm more for getting rid of these kinds of labels than for keeping them.
Which is an interesting thing you bring up, because in gamer culture, what's there to be gained by proving how hardcore you are? It's not like there's no material gain at all. It just seems like something completely arbitrary. I mean, you hear frequently describing a hardcore gamer, usually in the negative, when talking about people who play Call of Duty, for example. It's like, oh, you don't play those, you're not a hardcore gamer. And it's like,
that was a good Wyatt impression.
Oh, come on now.
Oh, poor Wyatt.
I'm also just looking at his
joke.
pictures.
One
By the way,
joke.
I'm looking at your picture on Sprites and Dice, and you could not look much more German than in that photo if you tried.
Isn't it
So
fantastic?
that is pretty amazing. Damn it, I lost my train of thought.
there's nothing to gain by proving your, quote, street cred by the type of games you log.
Brian, you're right. It's not even a question of... There's nothing to gain by proving street cred in almost any of these fandoms. That's
Very
not
true.
the point. The point is, it's something that was yours. It's not about a physical, tangible thing. It's about something that you felt was yours, that belonged to you, or maybe just your small group of friends. And again, inclusionary versus exclusionary. You're used to this being your safe thing, your security blanket, if you want to think of it that way. And suddenly now, it's something that everybody has. It's you ever share an idea with somebody, and then they instead of just agreeing with it and saying they like that, they try and suggest something different to do, or they try and convince you to change it, and suddenly it's not your idea anymore. It's just this thing that's kind of, you had some part of it originally, but now it's gone, the way of somebody else. I mean, this is why I think so many authors get upset about things like fan fiction. It's they had these ideas for these characters, and if they'd wanted the situation that you're writing about to play out, that's what would have happened. It becomes something very, very personal to people, especially in cases where people do have trouble making personal relationships, which is unfortunately a characteristic that gets associated with gamers a lot of the time, fairly or otherwise.
I've got two things that kind of spread off of exactly what you're saying. I think a lot of the issue is that labels in general, the labels you accept help define who you are and how you view yourself. And this is a label that people used to define themselves, and now it's becoming something else. And that what it's becoming isn't necessarily what they feel they are. And when you have this label that's defined you for so many years becoming something else, as we said earlier, you get defensive about it. I would say, and part of the reason why I think that gamer should be retired as a label, as a useful label, is because it's become too big to really describe anything. It's useless to describe because it means so many different things. So many, and some of them are exclusive things. There's so many different types of gamer underneath it, and those are more useful for people who are defining themselves. If you say gamer in general, as you said, that can mean D&D, that can mean tabletop, that can mean the collectible card games, Magic the Gathering, that can be any of a multitude of video game systems. You could be a retro gamer, you could be a current gamer, you could be one of the people who only plays Call of Duty. People give them a lot of crap. And we've given them crap on this, I'm pretty sure, before. But they're just as much gamers as anybody else, even if they only play one game that they rebuy every year. Like, all of these things are under the same label, and it's really, when you say you're a gamer, what does that really mean? It means you play a game of some kind somewhere. And when you go, well, everybody who's a gamer needs to be like me, otherwise, that's kind of what these people are being like when they're talking about gaming as a label, and it's really not useful in that sense. I'd argue it hasn't been useful in that sense, for a lot more than just the social games. It's just that before it was small enough that, okay, we all had differences, but there's a small enough pool that it doesn't really become a problem, except for that, that one kid down the street that's different than the rest of you all. But nowadays, with so many people, I mean, the number of people who play social games, it dwarfs the number of people who play regular games. And they're becoming, a lot of the old school gamers feel like they're becoming, the minority group in gaming when they were the ones who were there the whole time. And I think that the rise of social gaming is a great thing. I think that the people who are getting so defensive about this are taking a really short-sighted way of seeing it. Because a lot of, even if you only thought gaming was the hardcore gaming, you'd think that they would see that, okay, well, all these people are getting into social games, they're starting to enjoy games they wouldn't otherwise play. Maybe they'll graduate into other games.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Even if these people don't accept that social games are complete games in themselves, which they are, even if you don't see that, at least see it as, this is a gateway drug to get people into the rest of games. And I've been talking for way too long. Somebody else take over.
Wyatt had it. Wyatt wanted to come in right off of it, so...
And so this is where I'm going to offer, in an entirely serious, not in my joking way, a counterpoint, or actually sort of, I don't even want to say devil's advocate, because I'm still agreeing with you in this way. I think that the problem is that everyone, when they use this term, we're thinking about it in this very defensive manner. And in a lot of media, just the way that our media world works, we really like focusing on the negative side of things and the negative aspects of how things get brought in. So for me, my counterpoint is that a lot of people have been looking at it at the defensive, at these people that are going to say, no, this is my style. If you don't play my game, that's it. What if you look at it from the other way, where it's the inclusive way, where the way that I identify someone being a gamer is if they are enthusiastic about the fact that they play games. Now, hear me out. What this means is I'm going to use a good analogy. Sports. I like watching soccer. I like watching a little bit of hockey sometimes. And I like watching curling. I love watching the Olympics. Now, I would never call myself... I am Canadian. I think you called me German. Okay, never mind. We're not going to get into nationality wars. And now, let's say I would never call myself a sports fan. Why? It's just because I appreciate sports. I don't have a problem with sports. But I'm not going to say that this is what encompasses me. Now, for being a gamer, for me, that shows that I am enthusiastic. I love to share that with others. It's a way that I purposely identify myself with, because that's the way that I want to present myself to the world, or identify myself as, because I want to appreciate the things that come out of it. What do I mean by things that come out of it? It's a socially exclusionary game. Well, no, it's partially because of social media, and because of the fact that games have become multiplayer on the internet, because of esports, where, there's a lot of books like, Breaking Reality. Oh, no, sorry, Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. And a lot of researchers that are looking at games as a better form of education, and studies that are being done showing that people that are now identifying themselves as gamers, I'm not talking about a label of gamer, people that identify themselves as playing games or appreciate playing games, are actually becoming more social than the normal media standard. So, like, the normal standard of a modern person, because they're coming around the idea of, hey, I want to get together and have fun. I want to play. I want to be with other people, not because I have to be, not because of X, Y, or Z. It's because I want to. I want to reach out to others. And for me, that's the positive. That's the positive that we're going to be. In relation to your point, Ron, about how maybe we need a new word, I definitely can agree with that. I just don't know where I'd go. Like, I don't know what word could replace being a gamer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I guess I wasn't talking as much about a new word as it was, like, gamer is so broad that it doesn't really say anything. I think that we already have the right words for the type of games and genres we enjoy, and those should be more what people are using to define themselves. Like, I'll give an example. A lot of people already use retro gamer. And this is if you feel you need a label to define yourself. I usually tend to avoid them, but like a lot of people identify as retro gamers. And it's expected from that label that you enjoy a specific type of game. There's a specific type of people that tend to enjoy retro games. And I'm sorry, Shanna, I did not mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, it's okay. Proceed.
Okay, I'll finish this real fast. But I think that we need to get, like, most people, I guess my issue was most people, gamer is their, when they're talking about gaming as a label, and I can't believe I'm arguing this stuff because I really hate the use of labels in a lot of senses, but the gaming label is their primary one. And they're using, every single one of them, every single person who's using it is using it to describe something that in most cases, for the type of game they enjoy, for the type of social gaming that they enjoy, something else would probably be a better one for them to use, but they use gamer and they go, well, and they think, well, this is exactly what I mean and what I am, instead of, do you get kind of where I'm coming from? Or am I not coming across very well?
I do a bit.
I get it.
Go right ahead, Shanna.
Well, I guess what I was going to branch off of and say is that, I mean, I think, or at least I've heard some people at least add a descriptive factor to that gaming label to kind of narrow themselves down. Mm-hmm. I'm a tabletop gamer. Like you said, I'm a retro gamer. And then, of course, there's the all-inclusive big battle of hardcore gamer versus casual gamer. I mean, like, which I'm sure we'll get into, but, like, I've heard people find ways to say, I'm a gamer, but I am this type of gamer. And I think that, you know, that sort of narrows it down a little bit. And it also allows you to, you know, it allows for there to be delineations within what it means to be a gamer. You do all this stuff or you just do one segment of it. I think, you know, gamer is just sort of an all-inclusive bow around everything.
Well, that's why I was saying that most of the labels that people want, when I'm talking about it, it's more like people are saying gamer, but they're meaning something more specific. And I think a lot of them don't think about it in that there is a more specific term for what they're actually talking about. And yes, like tabletop gamer has been around forever. Retro gamer has been around for the last 10 years or so in primary usage. You know, hardcore versus casual versus mid-core versus whatever else you wanna use. All of these are ways of. See, this is why I hate this stuff, because I honestly think that most of the use of these labels separates all of the groups and doesn't show what they have in common. When we bring them together with what they have in common using the gamer label or no label, then they all start fighting with each other and start saying that they're not gamers.
Sorry. I don't mean to keep interrupting you. I just wanted to point out that I'm kind of really glad that you are struggling with the definition of this, only because I feel like the idea of switching from one label to another is going to just do way more harm than any possible potential good it could accomplish. So I don't think the question is we need a new label. I think the question is we need to stop with the label.
I wasn't necessarily saying we needed a new label. I never really meant that.
That was kind of what I got from that. Sorry. Okay.
I was getting more at when people are saying gamer and they're meaning a specific type of gamer, and in their mind they're going, well, this specific type of gamer, like I am, that enjoys these things. And a lot of times there's actually a word for what they're talking about, but they're using gamer instead, and then insulting or downgrading anybody who's not their specific type. And I shake my head long and hard and just go, what are you people are, stop it.
But I guess, like, the counterpoint to that, though, is if we don't use the term gamer, it's just going to be a different label. I mean,
yeah.
Unfortunately, the way of society is we categorize things and we categorize ourselves, and where, yes, it can be detrimental, it's just sort of what people you do it since high school. You know what I mean? I'm a jock. I'm a gamer. I'm a band kid. I'm a, whatever, And
as we get older, we just trade the labels for new labels.
Exactly. And, like, yeah, it would be great if we could drop the label, but I almost feel like that's a much bigger thing to ask of people. And I think the more reasonable thing to ask is, okay, you have your label, but don't shut yourself off and shut everybody else off because of that label. Be open-minded. Try a little of column A and a little bit of column B. Like, there's room for everybody here, but... Mm-hmm. It's just basically taking that label and allowing it to just be a label and letting yourself as a person branch off and be bigger than that label.
I think what we're struggling with is trying to figure out how to drop, at least what I'm getting from Ronnie, is how to drop the word or the use of the word gamer as a negative label.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
as an exclusionary label rather than an inclusion.
Yes, I think that's what you're trying to get to is seeing how we can, because we're going to be stuck with
whenever we use whenever we use gamer as a label to go, well, this means this, but nothing else. That helps no one. If you're going to use gamer as an inclusive label, that's fine, but that's not the way any of these people are using it, because an inclusive label is not as useful at defining yourself. And I think that's why the people are acting the way they are.
I think a part of it comes from also, and like this is, the fact of the matter is, the reason why people I think got defensive is because just like we were saying earlier, it was kind of a small community, or not a small community, but a very, defined community. And it got bigger because, quite frankly, if you look at it, the whole entire culture of quote unquote, I guess you could call it nerd culture, I don't really know a better way to say it, has exploded over the past, 10, 15 years? I mean, think about it. Think about like 15, 20 years ago. When you would look at, it used to be, there was a time where you would laugh at characters like Steve Urkel or like, Revenge of the Nerds or whatever. And now a show like The Big Bang Theory is a show that everybody is, all about. And the fact that Comic-Con is enormous, where at one point there was very small Star Trek conventions, and that was, and you kind of wouldn't admit that you would even go to something like that. The fact that the biggest summer blockbusters are, how many of them are comic book films? I mean, the culture as a whole has suddenly become extremely, quote unquote, I don't want to say acceptable, but it's become a bigger part of pop culture than I think it's ever been. And an entire scene of people are now able to really kind of delve into this, but it also means that, and I think that's why we get so defensive, is that then we get the Hollywoods tinkering in this stuff, and we get, big businesses tinkering in our good stuff. And I think that's why sometimes we get so defensive and hold it so close, is because we're like, we don't want you in here because you're going to ruin it. And that's, I think, where a lot of that defensiveness comes from.
Right.
It's certainly, just before you go, Wyatt.
Sure.
It's certainly a lot more widespread and much more mainstream than I feel it ever has been. I certainly have to agree with that.
Absolutely. And gaming is just as big in that as everything else in the culture, the films, the comics, everything.
Right. And I mean, that's part of it is let's think politics, or let's think anything else where, everyone's having the same conversation, right? But then the conversation 10 years later or 20 years later has shifted to an entirely new middle point. So our culture, for the first time ever, it's become, or the first time ever, at least in, the modern era, where it's sort of like we are the cool guys, the nerd culture. I mean, if there was one terminology that maybe would be one to replace gamer, I'm part of nerd culture, or something like gamer culture, something like that, because that doesn't feel so much as a label as you identifying as a group or identifying with a particular type. That might be my best answer. But I want to bring something up, which is that one of the problems with trying to abolish a label is that it is very hard to do. And I'm going to bring up something that from college, which is pretty much the whole idea that you can never control a word, or words mean nothing, because it's all about the intention behind the word. Words can pretty much be identified or used to quantify anything, if you really think about it. This is the huge push, in philosophy about writing, about English, about a life, is that words can't really identify much. Now,
absolutely.
One of the things about that is that the way that I really had a hard time struggling with this, right? I had a really hard time saying, oh, wow, everything is meaningless. You kind of slump into that little depression. Until you remember that, no, the thing is that behind the words is the intention, and behind the words is the attitude. So I think that one of the things that I'm going to continue to do is that I will probably still call myself a gamer. And the reason for that is simply because I've always used it, and I continue to use it as a positive outcry, a positive way of saying, this is what I am because I enjoy it. I appreciate it. Come and eat with me. Come and dine at my table and appreciate this. Come over and play a game and hang out. You know, I'll cook food, we'll have pizza, it'll be a good time. And for me, that's what's beneficial. I think that making it inclusionary, making it something where other people can identify with it is more important than trying to abolish the label all of itself. Because then suddenly we're always on the defensive, right? Even the people that want to identify with being gamers in a positive way suddenly feel like they have to tiptoe around. They suddenly feel like they have to back off and move away from the label, or they have to somehow make themselves other. And we see this a lot in other subcultures, and in a lot of it where in our modern society, people like to identify as something. They like to say that they're a fan of a particular music or a particular lifestyle or what have you. And then that always starts off good, but then suddenly there becomes different classifications. And I feel like by trying to subclassify and starting to differentiate and branch off can cause a lot of issues. I would rather cause a paradigm shift in our thinking rather than in our words. Make it more about the positive intentions of being a gamer, of wanting to come together and identify and share in our appreciation of games, than by starting to backpedal.
And that's what we're ultimately trying to do, is get rid of the negative connotations. So, Ronnie.
Going off, actually, my original point, it's so far away from it, I actually have something else I'm going to say instead.
All right, no problem. Not a problem!
Because it was a segue off of something that's so long ago right now that it's kind of pointless to continue with.
Okay.
But, off of what Wyatt was saying, words describe intentions and ideas. That's all they're there for. Words themselves mean nothing. What words are there for is to describe your feelings, your intentions, your ideas, the basic things. And a paradigm shift is exactly what we need. You're entirely correct. What I was saying earlier, and I'll say this, was when I was saying, using the sub labels, as I'll call them, these aren't ones that we're making up. These are ones that are around right now. All I was getting at is when people are using gamer to refer to specifically something else. But yes, we need a paradigm shift where people, just in general, where people become more inclusive. It's something, as a culture, we fought with forever. I mean, it's something humanity just struggles with, because we relate to people who are like us, and we don't relate to people who aren't like us in general as humans. And it's something that every culture struggles with and every culture fights with. And you can see this in every struggle that humanity has ever frickin' had. And eventually we get past, or we still struggle with, but we move on from one struggle and we accept one thing, and then we move on to another thing that we're going to be bigoted about. And gamers are dealing with their one right now with what defines them. And I think this is going to become a bigger part of the culture as the years go on. And I think that paradigm shift is going to come, but it's how long it's going to take us. And I think being open-minded and spreading that we need to be more open, these actions are going to do more than any... No, I love your podcast, Brian.
Well, thank you.
But if every one of us goes out there and shows the actions of being more inclusive to other gamers and calls people out when they're not, that's going to be more good than any words that we can say. This is a paradigm shift that's going to happen both from awareness, yes, but just as much through action.
Very, very well said. Well done.
Thank you.
And I love you too. Ben, you mentioned that you had something to say. If not, I'm going to end the first half on this.
I mean, how do you follow any or all of that?
I was going to say, I'm like, wow, he kind of put a nail right in the first half.
In a completely different topic. No. I mean, this is you're talking about people's identities, whether it's self-identifying, whether it's how others see them, whether it's how they want others to see them or how they don't want others to see them. It's really, this is a topic that in a lot of ways is very personal to a lot of people, and personal is absolutely the word I want to use there. And it's not, there's no, I don't even know how to describe it. There's no fix. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. I think we are so early into this conversation that, as we've seen in this podcast, we almost don't even know what we're supposed to be talking about. I mean, and it is really, the fact that we're able to at least have this conversation is a good starting point, but you have to wonder, is this something that people are going to sit down and actually discuss? Because we've seen what, furthest thing you can get from, reasonable, sane discourse. So even if people were going to discuss, okay, maybe we should stop using this word in this context, or maybe we should use this label for that, or not use this label for that, it would just quickly devolve into so many different problems. First and foremost, let's not forget that people won't necessarily like the idea of being defined by one label. Some people won't like the idea of being defined by any labels. And on top of which, somewhere you're going to offend somebody who, whether or not they legitimately have a right to be offended is, of course, an entirely different topic depending on so many different factors. But it's on the one hand, it's great that we're having this conversation, but on the other hand, I'm kind of like, well, what now? Where do we go? Where can we go? Where's a constructive, does anybody have a goal in mind? Or is it just the conversation? And that's fine if it's just the conversation, but, it's one thing to at least talk about things in such abstract terms, but if there's going to be problems, if there's a problem we're trying to solve, maybe we should start thinking about ways to actually solve it rather than just defining the problem.
And I think that's where we're all ending here, is that this is I think something that we have to really cement. I think we can hopefully all agree this is a good problem to be having.
Yeah,
I mean, in some ways, just because it means there's legitimacy, but it's still dealing with personal identity issues, and we know how seriously those can be taken. So, right. I don't know that I'd fully agree, but I see where you're coming from, and I think I see what you're trying to say with that.
Yeah, which is just that our culture, our society, the nerd culture, has hit a point where everyone is now trying to get a piece of the pie. And now that this has to be a question is a good thing for, again, to use a term that we're half saying is no longer usable, gamership, or being a gamer is a good thing, because now it means that there's enough people here to gather around and have it. So I think it's definitely that, and what Ron's been saying, what Shanna and Brian and everyone here has been saying, which is, shifting the dialogue to a more positive state of mind and make sure that the naysayers don't hijack it for everybody.
If this was a... Sorry, Shanna, continue.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if this is an issue that we could solve through brainstorming on a podcast really quickly, I don't think it would be a problem. Somebody would have done it by now. We can definitely in the second half talk about, different things that us and other people can do to try to improve things. But this isn't a quick fix. This is a long-term issue that's going to have to be dealt with over a period of time. It's not something that is going to be solved in an afternoon.
I didn't mean to imply that I thought that this was a simple issue that could just be solved quickly.
Oh no, I know you didn't.
My point was just we need to more than just defining the issue. We need to start figuring out okay, now that we have some handle on what we think the problem is, let's talk about that's you can't solve a problem until you can define the problem.
Exactly.
So my point is just, great, we're at the point where I think we're fairly in agreement on what the problem is, which means we've pretty much defined it. So now let's figure out if we can start solving it.
Shanna, you had one last thing to say? I heard you trying to cut in.
Yeah, I think that just, defining the problem is just step one, and just having, this kind of conversation, it could open it up to people who don't even realize they're doing it. There could be a gamer sitting here listening to us who's like, oh wow, yeah, I really do kind of, act like an asshole. I'm like, exclude a lot of people, and maybe in the long run this is actually going to be damaging. And it's that whole like, one person makes a change and a ripple effect. So that's
step
maybe
one.
This is step one.
Step 1, be a gamer. Step 2, don't be a jackass.
Step 3, profit.
Step 3, be inclusive. Repeat steps 2 and 3 until everyone is included. Step 4, profit.
Yes. All right, with that Cards Against Humanity reference, we will close out this first half. Some excellent discussion. I'm loving this. This is great. I'm just sitting back here listening to all you guys talking like, ooh,
I think
good.
you've talked the least out of all of us.
Which is great.
Why are you even here? We
can
do this podcast without you.
Yes. Well, I'm the one recording it. So
get off the stage, Brian. Get off the stage.
So in our second half,
you don't want to make him angry. You wouldn't like him when he's angry.
Yeah. So in our second half, we will talk about ways we could probably, at least start, now that we're having this conversation, how do we, bring, the term gamer or anything, to a more positive light, a more, favorable solution. We'll continue this discussion. I'm sure we have plenty more to say. Okay.
You'll never shut us up.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So,
and our first half has been so long that there's no second half. Good night.
It's just continuous.
Done. It's
No,
over.
we're gonna leave. We're gonna give you some music. Everyone will go off, do their own thing for a few minutes. You're listening to Downloadable Content. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content. We're all still here talking about what the hell does it mean to be a gamer anyway? Whose game is this anyway? None of us have flown off into the ether yet. Haven't been sucked away into some sort of temporal vortex or secret area. So, at least not yet. That could change. I mean, we do have a whole second half to go through. So, pick up the discussion where we left off. Although I do know that one of us is about to leave.
Awfully design.
Yeah, it's all your fault. You're gonna screw up everything.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Yeah, I do have to go, and I know we were going to start speaking segue about like things to do that are positive, and I think I really just want to jump on what Ron said and a lot of us others really did, which is that we want to take back the word. We don't so much want to change it or try to get rid of it because something else will just come in its place. I think one of the best things we can do is try to own the word and own the word in a positive way that is inclusive rather than exclusive. And one of the problems that we're already running into with this is that it's like a lot of things that are happening in the 21st century, which is problems are huge. Problems are too big for just one person to handle. It's not like, oh, I have a chore to take out the trash, and it's up to you whether or not you're going to do that. It's, all right, trash is a problem for the whole town. If I take out my trash, will everyone else do it with me? And a lot of people really get stymied with that and kind of choose to do nothing because it just feels so overwhelming. And I think it's, in a lot of ways, one of the ways that I'm going to fight back and the way that I'm going to try to help this sort of issue about the identification as a gamer is just to own it in a positive way, use it as an inclusive, use it as a way to say, look, come have a good time with me. Let's play games together and appreciate it. When I'm at the gaming store, if there's people that are looking and they usually want to play games where I play miniature games, and they can be intimidating, they look expensive sometimes, and a lot of people don't know how to deal with it because it's something that they haven't seen before. And I always go out of my way to say, hey, look, I'm playing this game. If you ever want to learn, I'm here every Thursday. And sometimes people come back, other times they don't, but that's fine. It's important to make that offer. And then the other thing that's, of course, is to watch your own language, because I know that one thing that gamers and any other subculture has an issue with is putting down other parts of the subculture that are not their own. So, if I play tabletop games, I hate video gamers and XYZ. Now, I know I'm fortunate enough where I identify myself as a gamer of pretty much everything. I pretty much play every sort of game. But I know for myself, something that I've been trying to fix in the last year is one that a lot of people love to insult or kind of snicker about, which is LARPing, live action roleplay. And it can be easy to, because the portrayal of it in modern media and other things can be so dramatic and so over-the-top ridiculous. So, I think, as we all know, there can be good and bad forms of everything, like music, like movies. There's good action movies and bad action movies, and I think it's the same thing with every single genre of being a gamer. So I know for myself, I've been trying to be very careful about that, where I want to learn more about those genres, so I don't just say, whenever I feel threatened as a gamer myself, or like, oh, well, what do? You hang out in the woods and play games in the woods? I won't immediately go, no, that's LARPing, and I don't do that. I don't want to have that reaction. I want to bring it to be more that positive, and that's really, I think, the last point I'd want to make for tonight. So, thanks for having me, Brian. I'm sorry I have to cut out early.
Hey, it's a better way to lose weight than Wii Fit is. At the very least.
Actually, it is. I have some friends that they don't do it like where it's just run out into the woods in a park. They go out to a park and they camp for 3 or 4 days.
Oh yeah,
that's crazy.
I know very little. I knew very little about it until like 3 of my roommates all were LARPers, and two of them, well, at least one of them was very, very big into it. So I got my own crash course in it, and I've still never done it. Mainly because of the cost, if not anything else.
Right.
But I'm definitely more aware of it than I was before.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is people just not being aware of it and not really understanding it.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Wyatt. Have a good night. All right. And as he bows out, I am now going to bring in the original Ron.
Oh,
I know.
I'm now a photocopy.
I know. You're so sad.
No, I love having Ron on here. Just when you say the original Ron, you make me sound like I'm a pale imitation of the real thing.
Well, you're not.
Oh, thank you.
You're not. You're wonderful, kind, loving soul that you are. You just haven't been on as many episodes as he has.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Welcome, Ron. Long time no see.
Yeah, a long time. But yeah, this thing called a job is a real kick in the nuts.
Silly whole needing responsibility thing. Anyway, let's get you up to speed. We covered a lot in the first half.
That surprised me.
That's shockingly, I had to do very little talking. So
we used a system where if we wanted to talk, we put it into the chat box, and then 20 minutes later, we got to say what we were going to say.
Okay.
Basically.
I like those types of things where it's just like a podium. It's like, here's my point. And 20 minutes later, okay, I'm done with my point.
Oh, it was awesome.
The best part about the whole thing is that by the time it got to your turn, your point was about, the person's argument from 3 turns ago, so your point was now no longer relevant, and it was almost like having 2 and 3 back and forth conversations with each other. So it felt kind of like being at the DMV, to be honest.
I kept
or any government facility.
I kept a notepad file open just so I could keep in mind what my point was when I came up with it.
More plot threads to track of than Game of Thrones.
I had my Google Doc open, yeah.
So I think what we were getting to in the second half was how to, at least, we're having this discussion, which is all well and good, but what actions can we do to remove the idea, the label of gamer as a negative? It says as the label of gamer not to be used as something divisive, but something more inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Again, I'm calling in blind, so I don't know what you guys talked about. But the main issue is that for most of our generation, like before the Facebook era, let's put it that way, that before the whole Facebook era, there wasn't a whole ton of multiplayer gaming that was commercially available. You had PC games like Doom and Warcraft and things like that had online capabilities to play against someone. But by and large, there was no real multiplayer capabilities, other than playing with your friends from down the street on Mario Kart or something like that. But with the birth of the internet and by proxy, the proliferance of it, with broadband speeds and things like that, the propensity for multiplayer games became a lot easier and also a lot more complex. Because now you have to try and include people in playing your game, whether it's an MMO or it's a Facebook game or whatever. And now you have, you're just used to this being a secular thing where it's you or maybe a couple other people, similar to you and a group of D&D friends. It's just you or 3 or 4 other people that you're playing D&D or Shadowrun or whatever. And it's just difficult to break that stigma after 15-ish years of it being that.
Not just 15. I mean, video games have been around for almost 45 years. And we mentioned in the first half that with now, the advent of social media and internet, gaming as a whole, there are no really solid definitions anymore. It's all fluid.
Yeah.
It's all fluid.
The general way I would describe it is, if you're a video gamer, if you interact with a random number generator of some kind through an electronic device. Because let's face it, video
poker, you're gambling. Players in card games.
It has to
he
be
said
through
he said video gamer.
Oh, okay.
He said video
that
gamer.
One.
He said video gamer.
If we're talking gamer, then you're just saying you're introducing randomness and story and to an event or a location or something like that with a agreed upon rules and guidelines.
I don't even think it has to be. I think that's even too specific. Story doesn't even necessarily have to factor into it. At this point, you might as well just be saying if you're breathing.
Yeah.
If it is a form of entertainment that you have to directly interact with.
Yes, that will probably be the simplest definition of gamer right there.
I could still misconstrue that, but I'm going to stop being a dick.
Yes, please.
If it's
you're basically saying gambling's a game, and let's face it, gambling is not a game. Gambling is the way to lose money.
I mean, it is a game, but that wasn't what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Are you thinking that there are some games not for entertainment? Because I could understand that.
Well, I mean, Dark
Yes.
Souls might qualify, but
Yeah.
that's a game meant for punishment. Let's not kid ourselves.
Hey, people have different strokes for different folks, man. You
No,
don't
it's
get-
true.
Some people,
listen-
some people have penance where they have to read scriptures, and some people have penance where they make themselves play Dark Souls.
Or Ninja
I
Gaiden.
didn't say it can't be fun for people, but that is a game for punishment. Let's be honest about this. That's why that exists. my
But
point
some
was
people are
that-
entertained by that.
Right, because they're playing it, that's what they think is fun. But my point was that, by your definition, I could technically construe playing with my dog as a game.
I mean, there's a way. Like you're interacting with your dog. You're both getting something out of it.
Right.
Now,
So-
it's a different form of game because it's like a
Life is a
form of
game.
Huh?
No, I'm trying to intentionally be difficult because my point is that this isn't something that's easy to define, and even when you give it,
Yeah, it's not,
you can either give it a super overly broad definition, or you can give it an overly narrow one, and either way, you're either including
yeah,
too many
it's
people,
two
or
sides
you're
of the
putting
shitty
it up.
coin.
Either,
Two sides of the coin.
let's not spend 30 minutes mincing the damn definition.
Let's spend 45 minutes missing this.
Oh,
We
bullshit!
did that in the first half.
Yes.
I was gonna say,
Now we're
but
supposed to
Brian,
be-
that's more in the English language. Mince
Brian,
meeting
this
every
is gonna be your first,
just say.
Brian, this is going to be your first 3-part episode, and the best part is we're not going to actually say anything.
Yeah.
You are going to get that Fox News style discussion, aren't you? You
I'm
jerk.
a lot more right if I'm louder.
Bravo!
So I think that we were supposed to be talking about how to make things better,
Make it
Yeah.
better.
Yes!
and apparently that's
Okay,
talking
to make
over.
an idea for mine is like to make it better, you have to go into it with the mindset of people have their own opinions and thoughts and ideas. Now you're welcome to make like a discussion out of it in like a different platform or like through like a voice chat like Skype or something like that. But in the rule context of the game, you need to be quote unquote professional and friendly, unquote, and play the game to the best of your ability so that you and everyone else you're playing with, whether it's one other person or an MMO of some kind, that you can get something out of it, whether it's pleasure or frustration or whatever.
Yeah, expanding upon that, exactly what you're saying, Ron. I mean, I think if we want to kind of talk about fixing the problem, I mean, I think one of the places where we've seen this explode a lot is now that gaming is such a social experience, and not just, it used to be a social experience with people you know. Now it's a social experience with people you don't know, and that leads to a lot more, I guess, comfort in saying whatever the hell you feel like it, and not worrying about hurting someone's feelings.
Anonymity of the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Which is that's just an internet thing, but like, you know, I think that's where a lot of that sort of, where a lot of that discouraging sort of thing that we're talking about comes into play. I mean, think about it. Just the idea of like, you know, like the term noob, and like how that just shuts people out. Like how you jump on an MMO and you're starting for your first time, and you know, if someone's trash talking you and it's not like it's your friend and someone you know, and you're like, oh yeah, they're just joking with me. That's one of those mindsets where it does shut people out, where it's just like, okay, you know, here's these people who do this a lot and they don't consider me a gamer. They're calling me a noob because I just started, may not even just started gaming. I just started playing this game and I don't know the mechanics yet.
Yeah,
That's where that comes in.
That's an issue with that's probably more so an issue with the MMO aspect, because MMOs can be very insular once the game has been out for a certain period of time. Like it coming in at launch of a game, or like whenever there's any sort of new major content patch, you're generally okay because everyone's kind of like an even playing ground. But if you're playing Final Fantasy or EverQuest or World of Warcraft, like barring the yearly update for World of Warcraft, like if you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna get like there's gonna be a lot of like new baddie like troll things being called against you just because you're new to the game, new to the system, trying to learn how to play it.
Talking about from where we left off last time about inclusiveness and how we can try to make that better. One point I really want to make is that I think the solution to this problem is very different between in person and on the internet.
Yes,
because
Very much so.
I think in person, if somebody's being a jackass about, somebody else not really being a real gamer, that's the kind of thing you should call out and make people understand that it's not good to be a jackass. But on the internet, a lot of times that's what they're trying for. And while if there's a system for reporting them for being a jackass, that's perfectly fine. Feeding the trolls does not help on the internet. In a general sense.
Yeah. Probably a good example for like in person would be like Magic the Gathering. Like you say you're an experienced card player and someone's like, hey, I just bought this starter deck. Like,
that's where I was going.
Like, can you teach me how to play? You'd be like, yeah, I'll teach. Like, I have a friend that actually, a few months ago during the holidays, she got a starter deck for Magic. Mm-hmm. And she's like, hey, can you teach me how to play? And I'm like, sure, no problem. And I sat down, walked her through, showed her, like, tried to explain it as simple as I could, which, for those who don't know, Magic the Gathering can be a fairly complicated system at times. So I'm just trying to be as simple as I can.
I still can't figure it out.
Yeah, and walked her through, like, here's when you draw your card. Here's how you can respond to a spell I play if you want to. And just be like, it's very friendly and exclusive. You can't. Don't be a jackass and be like, no, you're an idiot. Here's what you should have done.
Exactly. This is actually exactly where I was going. In one example of a way to make people more exclusive that's been used was in Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering, a lot like a lot of games, has issues with the way they treat the females that play the game, and inclusiveness regarding them, and how a lot of people feel it's a male-dominated space, and how the men treat people who move into that space. So rather than just sit back and complain, one of the ladies who plays created the Lady Planeswalker Society, a safe, inclusive place for any player of the game. That includes men. But the whole point of the space was that it's a place for newer players who might not feel comfortable enough to go to a Friday Night Magic or into a bigger event, to have a place a safe place to learn, for more experienced players to be able to help some of the newer ones, and just a place where it means more to have fun and enjoy yourself than how competitive some of the other places are. And that idea spread from one little group to a group that I'm pretty sure is across most of the country. I know it's gone into Canada. And I think that's an awesome thing where we talk about how this is a big issue that no one person can deal with, and that's entirely correct. But it shows that one person with their idea really can, change people's perceptions and, make a bit of a difference.
Well, I think I've seen that in action. I mean, just at PAX, and Ben, I think you can attest to this. I mean, like the tabletop areas especially, there were tons of open tables just from people's, free play, come in and learn how to play. Things like that.
Sorry. Yeah, that was like every game that people were trying to sell was just, here, what better way to sell you on our game, not sell you on it like make you buy it, but show you why it's a cool game, than to literally just say, let's play and see how you like it. And if you like it, great. You can purchase a copy or invest in our Kickstarter or what have you. And there you go. It's literally the card game equivalent of demos. And hey, we all know how effective demos can be at getting people to buy games. So yeah, there was a really active community. There was a lot of conversation. It was a very lively area, the tabletop section. And to be honest, what I did see and what I did play looked like it was actually a lot of fun.
And you bought Boss Monster from it.
I did. Well, that was from you, but yeah.
To go back on the Magic thing for a brief second, like the whole is it misogyny is the correct terminology, right? Where it's like
that's it.
Females,
that's the correct term.
That's dumb, and that's what probably might be more indicative of a problem with society in general. But like, I don't care whether you're black, white, male, female, an alien, whatever. Like, you play against me, I'm going to treat you with respect and assume you're intelligent enough to know how to play the game. And if you don't, I may beat you into the ground, but I'm going to say, hey, here's where you messed up. If you want to learn, I can try and help you, get better at the game.
And that's all well and good, and Ben had one of the last things he said in the first half was that, to affect change, really, it's personal.
Yeah.
And, that's all well and good. And, we should be doing that. But, what do we do when we see, idiots, whether in person or online, trying to be part of, have this sort of exclusive vibe?
Ignoring the issue, a lot of people's thing is, okay, I see something going on that I don't that's wrong. I'm just going to keep my head down because it's going to be a real pain in the ass to get involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's the complete wrong. That's to know the right thing and to do nothing is just as bad as anybody else who's actually going out there and doing stuff. That's just what it comes down to. And it's way too easy to just be the guy who just walks by.
Yeah. It definitely is going to be on. It definitely is going to be on you as the person to call out the injustice and to attempt to correct it. There's only so much that a judge or some officiating person can do. It's going to be on you as a person to lead by example.
Leading by example is exactly the term to use, because if you want to enact a change, the first thing you need to do is exemplify that change.
Which in turn, hopefully, through time, removes the pejorative label of, gamer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously something like this isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take many, many generations.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd... Sorry.
Go ahead.
You go. No, you go.
Well, what I was just going to say was, I think, the fact of the matter is we're the first generation that's dealing with this. That's why it's, that's why it's important to have this conversation, is because now it's the time to sort of figure out how to deal with this sort of thing. This really, like Wyatt was saying before, this hasn't been an issue before. So now it's a matter of, just identifying identifying what the issue is, or like how to counteract the issue and where it's coming from exactly. Like, what kind of people and what kind of gamers, I guess you could say, are the ones who are sort of making this difficult.
And besides, it may not take multiple generations to deal with this, because in multiple generations, they may be dealing with the issue of, that's not a real game, that's virtual reality. Real games are ones where you're holding the controller, you're not controlling it with your mind.
Talking about the writer of the opinion article interviewing the Atari developer who thought that, only those types, only the pure gameplay Atari games were true games, and what we have today is just, garbage.
We need to solve these issues so that then future generations can be bigoted about new issues.
What's kind of funny about the gameplay thing, and I didn't mention it earlier, but I still think it is kind of worth repeating, is that's extremely similar to a conversation that that was had around the time of in the build-up to the sixth generation of consoles. I'm sorry, the seventh generation of consoles with the Xbox 360, PS3, and the Wii, because the two systems were emphasizing so heavily their graphics, whereas Nintendo was just emphasizing the gameplay. There was an interview there was a panel where Mark Rain of Epic Games was asked point blank, aside from graphics, what do you think is the biggest innovation of this generation? And he said, the graphics. Duh. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting to just see that, like, this is still a conversation that people have, that there are people who are like, there's nothing more important than big graphics, and there is a conversation that, there's nothing more important than gameplay. So I think we kind of can also look to that and say, this might be a discussion that goes on for a while. Like, we could solve the gamer issue and then have it crop back up again in 3 years.
Well, the issue I think on that, and it's a completely different subject, but I at least wanted to say a little thing on it, is I think a lot of people equate good gameplay, bad gameplay, and good graphics and bad graphics, not realizing they are completely separate sections on a graph, and that one does not, like, there are great games who have great graphics and bad games that have bad graphics, and vice versa. But, like, a lot of people, like, Wii is my primary system. I own more Wii games than any other of the current consoles. In fact, I only have so many of both PlayStation and 360 games. But a lot of people seem to, sell the Wii on, well, it has great gameplay, but the other systems have great gameplay too. Just different types of games. But that has nothing to do with the gamer conversation, so I'm gonna shut up now.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I thought it was kind of worth mentioning that, like, we're still having the same conversations, we're still having the same arguments and discussions. So
they don't go away.
Unfortunately, they do not go away.
We just move on to new platforms.
We get
to rage
distracted
about.
by something else and then eventually come back to them because we never actually
shiny
anything. Pretty much.
Most social issues, there's probably, if you really looked at it, just like the hero's journey, there's probably about 10 social issues, and then every other issue is just one way or another of interpreting that issue.
Sure.
That's why we keep having the same conversations over and over again.
Pretty much.
And the cycle of human history goes round and round and round. Meanwhile, meanwhile, Ron sounds like he's on a Mario Kart course.
Is there a truck?
Yeah.
In the back?
No, that was me throwing a blue shell at some bastard.
Ah,
with the Luigi death stare.
Yes, the Luigi death stare. Like, right, you deserve that.
I love that it made the local news here in New York. By the way, that was
definitely.
The Luigi death stare made the news because apparently it was that important.
Well,
yeah.
On what we were saying,
back to the topic at hand.
So anyway,
back to the topic at hand. Talking about how these issues just keep cropping up. I mean, how many times have we heard about inclusiveness being an issue in anywhere else but gaming? I mean, how many times has this issue popped up elsewhere? Now we're getting it. It's not like excluding people from your group, trying to make it one that's a part of human nature that we struggle with.
And always has.
And it's not something that's going to go away. It's something we struggle with. It's something we're always going to struggle with. And it's one of those things where the struggle is important. It's important to try to change things, trying to make the right thing happen. But it's just something that humans as a whole seem to be hardwired to try to do. And it's why it's a struggle that we keep doing in every piece of our lives. And awareness of the issue makes it better. It helps, and it'll improve things for future generations, hopefully. But it's never an issue that we're not going to have. Even if we move on from gaming needing to become inclusive, we'll move on to something else.
Well, I think it also helps that, just going back to the idea of, how we can erect change and fix things in it is, like we said, it all goes back to yourself. And, as I know, Ron, you kind of said, you've done this, with your friend with Magic. As the veteran gamer, I guess you could say, or as someone who's been in it in a while, when you meet the new gamer, and make them feel invited. Make them feel, because that's not going to do nothing but pass on the positive. That's going to pass on the good. Because in passing on that spirit, you're opening up another person with a positive spirit as a gamer, as a person who loves to game. And they are in turn going to share that spirit with other people. Because at the end of the day, one of the reasons why people get so defensive and so exclusive to the point where they start trolling is because at some point they felt excluded. That's the way we deal with the feeling of exclusion. We start to throw it at other things. And, like I said, I know I've been making this example a lot, but, I'm really into punk rock and I'm really into heavy metal. And a lot of people come to that genre because they feel like misfits and outcasts. And then in turn, sometimes you get them that start to push out the new people who get into it because it's nice to be on that side now where they're not the one on the outside. Now they're on the inside of something. And so an almost automatic reaction to that is to start to push back against other people who are getting in. When you flip that on its head, and when you're the positive beacon, that brings people closer and brings people in who in turn do the same for the next person. And all it's going to do is benefit us because it's just going to make a more richer community. And at the end of the day, that's going to make a bigger community of people who are creating games for us. So
diversity in all forms is so important in just game in any place in general, but it makes so many more interesting games when you have people with different perspectives making them.
Exactly. And like at PAX, we go to PAX and we nurture the indie gamers, and we're the positive beacons, and we're like, yeah, keep it up, we love this, we love what you're doing. And in turn, they are still passionate to keep doing what they're doing. That's the power of positivity.
I think a lot of this ends up coming back to I'll use high school as an example of people, as you said, people were excluded, and now they're kind of taking it out. But it's like people were excluded, so they found something that they defined themselves as, gaming being the example here, and then later on, people who maybe represent the kind of people who bullied you when you were younger or caused issue or made you feel excluded when you were younger, and now they're taking part of that label that you've used for all these years, and you disagree with it. And if it's a very easy thing if they like games that are different than yours, let's say casual games is what spawned this whole thing. Like, it's very easy to go, well, they don't count, they're not gamers, they don't count. And that's such the wrong attitude to have. It goes. I think a lot of it goes back to the premise, and I've seen this in the geek and nerd community myself. Of if you were bullied, you have two different ways to deal with it. One is to try to make things better for other people so that they don't feel that way. Or two is when you have the power, you start to bully back.
Exactly.
It makes you. Like, that's a choice you make. It's a choice you make between trying to build people up and trying to tear people down. And too many times people can't let go of what happened to them in the past, and now they feel like now they have power, they need to wield it in that way. And I think that's a bad thing, and we need to try to improve from that. We need to set the example. That's what we have to do.
Very nicely.
Mic drop.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun. I got nothing. I think you just won the internet.
I think you just won. All right.
Or you won internet, sir.
Thank you. I will keep it in my closet so that when we lose the current one, I can just be like, I have another.
I got backup.
I have a spare internet.
Mm-hmm.
So, with all of the types of games that are out there, it's no longer confined to, we no longer have the old. Well, we still have the PC versus console argument, although that's a dead horse. All of the social games, all of the mobile games. Do you think we're starting to come full circle, though? Do you still think there's a lot of work left to do? I mean, we've mentioned at length that we think that for total inclusivity, it's going to take many generations. But I seem to have the impression that we're making good headway now.
I mean, progress doesn't necessarily come quickly, and progress doesn't necessarily mean either that things are moving quickly or things aren't moving well at all. It just means that you're further along than you used to be. And a lot of times progress doesn't really come obvious when it does actually show up, because it's hard to see that things were really different. On a day-to-day basis, it's not like, despite what some people have claimed, it's not like you wake up one morning and racism is solved because, somebody made some advancements in the world. But
the Supreme Court said racism was over.
Yeah, no, Republicans have been harping on that one for a while. I still don't quite believe it, though, but that's okay.
No.
The point is that, again, these things tend to not happen quickly, so it's really difficult to define, yeah, this is over now. This is no longer a problem, because you don't quickly know that it's not a problem. It usually takes a while. So yeah. I would say we are making some progress, but I would also say that, I wouldn't expect that to be any indication that things are going to go quickly.
The other side of that is And I think racism, as you just brought up, is a great example on this, in that no matter how far you get along, there's always farther to go.
Can I also just really quickly interject that I don't mean to compare the difficulties of gamers with racism. I don't want anybody to think that I'm putting those two on anywhere the same plane.
No. I did not think that at all.
Okay.
I was just saying that as a comparison of it with
respect
things
to the
like
fact
this,
that progress isn't made quickly.
Well, progress isn't made quickly, and what I was getting at is that no matter how much progress you make, there's always farther to go. It's not an issue that you can get to a point and go, well, it's done. Any social issue that has to do with people is an ongoing process, and it's a process of awareness, which means it never really goes away. The issues might become less prominent, but in most cases, like, I don't think our discussion here on inclusivity in gaming is something that's ever going to not be relevant. It might become, there might be less big things about it, and people in general may become more inclusive, but I think a generation from now, assuming that gaming is still around in some way, shape, or form, and we aren't, energy beings, that this conversation will still be relevant, and people are still going to be having it. They may be having it about different specific issues, but I think that this kind of thing is a social issue that's not going to go away. I don't think it'll ever go away entirely. As long as people are different. As long as people are different, there's always going to be people who don't want who want to relegate them backward, and whether it's difference in gaming or difference in racism, as long as there are differences to segregate people based on, people are going to do that, and they're going to try to make their own groups, and there's always going to be a need for people to speak up about that in any way, shape, or form in society, in every portion of it. And gaming is just getting a headline for theirs now.
Well, I think there's also something to be said for the fact that, there's going to also be a generation where this is going to be the norm. Like it's been brought up before, there's the whole hardcore gamer versus casual gamer market, and it's like, or argument, and it's the idea that if you don't own a console, you're not a hardcore gamer. There's a generation of kids that are coming up right now where gaming is all under that one umbrella. It's not like us where if you played video games, you literally had a console in your house, or you had a handheld control. Those were the only means to play video games at that point. And now that's so not the case, but you also have a whole generation of kids who are growing up with that not being the case. And this may, when they get to be our age, this may be a moot point to them, where it's like, well, a game is a game is a game. Why are we,
I doubt it, because right now we in our generation, we had PC versus console. Now we're having games, including PC and console, against social. When they get older, I will guarantee there'll be something else that they're going to use as their new thing that they're going to rage against.
Will it be the machine?
Possibly. It'll be a different thing. It's not going to be something we can even guess at right now. But I don't think that I think by the time that the inclusivity between social games, regular games, as soon as that becomes a little bit more equitable, something else will come in that people will then rage against. Because this has happened like at least 3 times already.
I tend to think, though, we've seen a lot of progress, and while it's a good start, it's certainly a good start, but, going to PAX now, I've been to PAX 3 times, and there is just definitely more parity between genders. It's not the male-dominated club that gaming has somehow thought it was.
Oh, I have tons of gamer girlfriends. It's amazing. I used to be all alone.
What do you mean that there's vaginas in our video games?
I'm asking for a friend.
Wait, what?
I'm showing you. I said, you said you had a ton of gamer girlfriends. I said, are they single? I'm asking for a friend.
Actually, I don't. No, none of them are at the moment. I'm sorry. We get snatched up. You know what I mean?
I was gonna say I would be very surprised if any of them. I was gonna say honestly, if there was if one of them was single, I'd say, oh great, what's wrong with her? But that's you being horrible. I'm a terrible person, guys.
You put a video game controller in a girl's hands, and she's basically Jessica Rabbit. If you put her in a room full of guys, it's just over.
Yeah, well, it's like the pigeons in Finding Nemo. Mine, mine, mine.
Exactly.
Alrighty, well, I think we've had a very lengthy discussion. I think we've pretty much beaten this topic to death. So, if anybody has any final thoughts on the issue, now's the time to say them, or if you had any points that you wanted to make in the first half but didn't. Anything you forgot, you can mention it now. If not, I'm going to close the episode out.
I'd just like to say to the people listening to this, and this includes myself and anybody else here as well. Now that we've had this conversation and we've exchanged words and ideas, I think that the right thing to do is to try to be more aware of trying to be more inclusive in your own life, because in gaming and in other ways, because that's the only way that we're ever going to enact a change. Talk is cheap, but actions speak louder. And I'm gonna try to be better about that and be better about calling other people out, because I try to be very inclusive, but I'm also very non-confrontational, and I think that's the only way we'll ever really move forward.
How profound! Thank you, Prophet Ronnie.
No problem. It's only $2.99 an hour for calling my Prophet hotline.
All right.
Promises may not be true.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, the more positive energy that we have in this, and the more that we, that we encourage other people that, the label gamer is okay as long as you take it as something that's okay and you don't use it to block out other people and you don't use it with negative connotations. That's just going to make it, like I said, a richer scene, a richer culture of gamers and of people who enjoy video games, and that'll benefit all of us in the long run. So, I think, like you were saying, enact it in your own life, keep the positivity going.
In all seriousness, that's definitely something that we should all be cognizant about.
Don't be a dick. There we go.
I just said that.
I think if that's the case, if we do that, then I don't think the term gamer really needs to be retired. I mean, if it's nothing more than a description if you put it in that light, and it's just a description that introduces you to other people who enjoy video games. That keeps it from being something that kicks people out.
There you go. All right. Anyone else? Got it. All right. That's very truly duly noted. So, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts about this episode or any other episode of Downloadable Content, you can get in touch with us at facebook.com/DLContent, at Twitter at DLContent, on Tumblr at DLCpodcast.tumblr.com, or you can email us dlcontent1@gmail.com, and all episodes can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. And so it remains for me to thank Wyatt. He came on at the last second, so I didn't get to give him his plug for his gaming blog, spritesanddice.blogspot.com. Him and John Glover, who also occasionally serves as a panelist on Downloadable Content. That's their gaming blog. Check it out. And good fun. Oh, Ben, are you official now? You're officially,
my first piece, which is titled Xbox Off, was posted about a week ago? Yeah, last Tuesday, exactly a week ago.
Okay, so that's official now. So now you're on that,
apparently, yeah, sure, let's go with that.
Sure, alright, Ben.
Thing. I've got another piece that's going to be going up probably, well, I don't know exactly within, but hopefully within a couple of days, talking about some of the, pre-E3 coverage that we're getting and sort of what I think is going on there. So look for that. And then hopefully next week there's going to be a lot of pieces from all of us about stuff from E3. Probably more. Well, I know my stuff's probably going to be shorter, just reactions and announcements and things like that. So check it out. It's spritesanddice.blogspot.com. And yeah, feel free to leave any comments, questions, etc., etc. And follow us on Twitter as well, at Sprites and Dice. Sprites and Dice.
There you go. So you'll have E3 coverage. Downloadable content is going to have an E3 episode. Joshy is going to be on that one. We're breaking him out of cryogenic.
No.
We're breaking Joshy out of cryogenic stasis.
Joshy?
The Joshy from the Britain.
Season 5 yet?
But from the Britain lands.
Britannia?
What delay and how long it takes for the sound to travel all the way there and back?
I know. He gets about as much airtime as Miyamoto. It's like the token appearance, and then they go put him back into the freezer. So
and it also needs a translator, so it's a very apt comparison.
Yes, exactly. So I know that's coming up. That's a future DLC. So let's put this thing to bed. It remains for me, as I've already thanked Wyatt. Remains for me to thank Ron, Ronnie, Ben, Shanna for this wonderful, huge panel. Haven't had one of these in a while. So thank you guys for being on. Hope you guys come back.
Glad to be here.
Because you love this thing.
Always.
Because you love this thing so much. I'm Brian. Have a good one, everybody.